Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you guys are able to hear me here in studio. I'm just going to be in front of the face cam here for a few minutes, let people kind of trickle in. I see that Ken Hoskins has joined us in chat, so welcome. Anyone else who pops in, please let me know you're there. We'll say hello, and we'll get started here fairly soon. So I am going to be working on a little bit of painting tonight. Mostly it's just going to be some inking, but I'm going to kind of bring you guys up to speed on some thoughts that I had and what I've kind of done in the interim here working in the studio. So last couple of days have been fairly busy for me in terms of like actual work, so I haven't got as much hobby stuff done, but I have still got some things done, and mostly I've been theory crafting around what exactly I want to do and what it is I want to do next on the project. So I've been kind of bouncing around a little bit, and I'll probably be able to show you guys some stuff here in the next hour and a half or so. So welcome Ice9172. I have not seen you in chat before, but welcome. So maybe you're a first time goer here. So I am streaming on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, and also simultaneously to Facebook, I hope, or at least I have linked there. So I'm not sure where you guys are trickling in from, but hopefully everything is going according to plan on your end, and you guys are able to hear and see. I'm just going to run you really quickly through some of the screens that we're going to operate here. This evening is really just going to be this one and one other. But if I bring you guys over to the table cam, my voice will pick up, but I'll be farther away because I'm going to be using the secondary mic. So if you're hearing me, it will be a little bit further away. I understand that. You guys will get the overhead cam here, and then you'll see me primarily working right where that large blank space is. So hopefully that transitioned well for you. So if you're just joining me for the first time, what we are doing is we're working, or continuing to work, I should say, on the Kashyyyk build. So I've been kind of bouncing around, like I said, working on some of the structures, some of the pieces that are going to be attached to the large tree. I have purchased the baseboard for this, so I started laying out some of the layout, and I'll talk a little bit about that tonight. I won't bring that on camera because it's basically the same size as the work area, but I will kind of talk a little bit about that. We'll be transitioning over there in a few weeks in terms of starting to work on some of the base layout once we get the tree done, but I have got some paint and things down laid on a few of the pieces, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. And as I said, some next steps for those pieces. And then I'm going to primarily spend my time, because it's a nice and an easy process where I can answer questions, and I'm just going to be adding some ink to that hut, a couple layers of different colors, and then kind of walk you through what the coloration is going to be for that as well. So I will just jump over to the table and we'll get started. I can see chat here in the window. It's on the TV behind me. And so if you have any questions at all, please feel free to ask them. And I will answer to my best of my ability. If you want to see something that you haven't seen before, or you're new here for the first time, the rules are interrupt as much as possible. That way I don't have to work, and I can actually spend more time showing you guys interesting things rather than watching me work on things, which is sometimes not that interesting. So without further ado, let's jump over to the table. Okay, so just a quick sound check over here. Hopefully you guys are picking me up on the secondary mic, and if everything's good, just let me know in chat. You can thumbs up or leave a comment. That's also fine. So what we're working on tonight, or what I should show you, what we are going to work on, is we're going to work on the hut here. And let me just rotate this around a little bit. I'm going to try to add a little bit more light for you guys. Hopefully this will pick up a little bit and give you a bit more. It's a bit shadowy here at times, but let me just rotate this light around a little bit for you guys. Hopefully we can give you a bit more light. I'm just going to back that camera up just a little bit, add a bit more light this way, and then hopefully that'll pick up. There we go, that's a bit better. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on this, and primarily, so I've given a little bit of an airbrush and got some base colors laid down. What we're going to do now is we're going to come in and we're going to start working on the wood panel. So you can see that I have three sort of panels. This one is just a base color. This one has some skeleton horde contrast paint laid down on it just to give it a little bit of the recesses, some brown, and then this one here I've added some null oil over it, and it looks a little bit dark at this point. It's not quite so dark, and we're going to bring that back up with a little bit of airbrush and dry brush later. But I did want to get some of the darker grain laid in there, and then when we bring that back up, I think it'll give it a little bit of a nicer contrast. But again, just trying to pick some of that grain out at this point, and you can see it's definitely contrasting well with the base layer. So this piece of wood at the top, and then the 3 pieces of wood at the bottom. These large panels here will also get that darkened color laid in as well. So that's what I'm basically going to be working on tonight, just painting some of these out and laying a little bit of color down. In addition, some other things that I've been working on. If you joined me last time, I was actually working on making some of these pieces here, these sort of buttresses and abutments. I started working on them, and then I really dislike the overall look, so I actually scrapped that, and I went back to my original intent. And I had always used this as a spacer for the top of this, but when I got looking at the actual piece on the reference photos, the gap that this showed really showed just a darkened recess, and it didn't show really any internal structure. And I was a little confused as to what I might do in there if I had a little bit more room to work, because it wasn't going to be large enough for a figure, but it was going to be large enough that you could see inside. And so what I decided to do was decrease the distance, and the distance, what I'm referring to, is the distance between the roof and the under layer here. And so what we're going to do is just black that out and have it more of a condensed structure. You'll also notice that I drastically changed the look of this. So I got looking at the reference photos, and I noticed that this piece, I originally was gonna have it come in and be sort of straight and then bell out at the bottom. I didn't actually like that. It didn't really look like the reference photo. So what I ended up doing was I ended up creating this sort of scalloped look here. And so now it kind of cuts in, goes down, and then rounds out. So it's a much more symmetrical piece, and it has more of a clean line here. So what I did with that was take some thin plastic card, 1/2 mil plastic card, and I ended up just adding a little bit of tab to the top, and then I folded it. I gave it a fold here along the edge, and then I glued it right here to keep it in, because otherwise it would have ran a little bit straighter, and it would have been more like cone shape. So I put a little bit of glue here, and then I wrapped it around the bottom, and again, just tabbed the bottom here. What I'm going to do is end up covering this with paper mache and kind of give it the hide look. And so I'm not really worried about the gaps in between here. The paper, I'll make sure I run the first layer I'm going to do is long strips, and I'll make sure that I cover over 2 or 3 of those at a time to give it some strength. And then I'll cut back into the more square shape, and I'll lay those over the top, much like I've done on some of the other pieces, which I will show you as well. And so for the top here, I am going to end up laying this spacer in. However, what I'm going to do first is just take a secondary disc, this right here, and that's just going to lay over. And what I'm going to use that for is just to ensure that none of the tabs ever lift up. So I'll end up adding glue in here, and then put this down, and that will give me a nice finished piece. I can cover that over. Another thing too is when I bring the paper mache up, I'll bring it up over this. Sometimes when you go over the threshold of something, the paper mache may tend to pull or dry and get a little bit of a billow. So to avoid that, what I'm going to end up doing is using this as well to just secure that and keep that paper mache even tighter, and have no kind of loose ends or sort of flipping up from there. So that's kind of how this design came to be. We're back to this bell shape, and I really like the look of this structure, to be quite honest. I think it really captures the look quite nicely. In addition, some other things that I did is I started to lay some paint down on this. Now I realize that's a bit shadowy. I'm not sure if I can. Let me just move this camera a little bit this way. Try to get a bit more light, a little less harsh. But if I bring it in a little bit closer, maybe it's a bit better. So when we're looking at this, what I ended up doing was laying some paint down on the bell shapes. And it has a little bit of a wheel type shape at the top. It has this design in the reference photos again, and you can really pick out the hide covering here. As I play with the light, you can sort of see the patchwork. And what I ended up doing with this was, and I am going to just rotate one more light for you guys. we'll increase the light there, and we'll maybe drop this light down a little bit so we can get, there we go, now we're talking. So with this, you can see the hide layering in there. I've picked out some colors, I added some color variation in as well. And then that's just extended right through the top, so you can really see that patchwork is starting to pick out. And I really liked how that ended up looking. So I was going to originally do strips on the side, but what I decided to do was just airbrush it to give it a little bit more of a three-dimensional look. And so I did several layers on there, and it was originally black in the photos, or it looks more black, but I ended up going with a darker gray and a little bit of a deep reddish brown. So I started with the reddish brown, and then I added the gray over it just to give it that 3D look. So kind of has that spider web effect, and I ended up doing 2 of these. Now I'll explain why I didn't do 3 in a second. I'm going to go grab the other one. I originally did one of them as a test. I didn't like it. So I'm going to explain how I'm going to save it and explain why I like this design a little bit better. So just bear with me for one moment. I'll grab that. Okay, so a few more show and tell items here. And if you're in chat hanging out, the chat number shows me at 1, so I'm not sure if there's actually more people in or if it's just a quiet night, which is perfectly fine. I just want to make sure you guys are able to hear and see all this stuff. So let me start off with the test sample here. Now here it is with the black black airbrushing. And so you can see, let me go there. So you can see there's a little bit of a difference. I went a little bit thicker originally, and then I ended up I settled on something a little bit thinner here. The top is where I really disliked it. Now, I don't dislike it in the sense that the pattern's bad, but again, more of a thick line, and I thought it dominated the top a little bit too much. And so I like the thinner lines, and then I kind of like the thinner and more subtle color variation here. This was a little bit too contrasty for me. So what I'm going to end up doing is, and also I did all the testing on here, so when I was doing the patchwork on the top, I was experimenting with colors that I wanted to do the patches, and a couple of the patches ended up being a little bit too dark for me. And so I ended up just using that piece and continuing it through. I was going to originally cover over some of the darkness with the lines, but then they ended a bit too thick and I just didn't like it in general. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up just recovering this with the paper mache. It's not going to make it too thick or anything because it's just going to be negligibly thicker. I'm going to cover that over. I'm going to re-ink it, bring it back up to this level here, and then I'm just going to repaint it and get it back up. So we have 3 of these in the end, and I think 3 will be the nice number to have on the skirmish table. So one of the things I did notice when I started laying out the layout was that the table is quite full. It's actually a lot more full than I thought it was going to be. So I thought I was going to have some trouble filling some real estate with some of the lower structures, but I think it's going to end up being pretty jam-packed without me having to add a lot more to the table, which is both a good thing and potentially a bad thing because I wanted to have a little bit more room to play with, but in the end, it's going to be a pretty full skirmish table, and it'll be really aesthetically pleasing. It'll be tight for players, but I think it's going to encourage a lot of aggression. So additionally, what I wanted to show you is I wanted to kind of show you the advancement that I sort of made on the platforms. So you've been seeing this one, I've showed you this one, I'm just using this as a reference. So you can see now that this platform and this platform, maybe better in the overhead, I think, have now got up to about the same level. Now the center of this is going to be covered with the hut, so just ignore the color variance there. But the other 2 pieces are actually quite close in color. Now the reason that they don't look as close in color is just the pattern in the palette itself. But if you look from the side, they are actually very, very close. Now, the one place where it differs in color, and if I can leave this one up, I'll turn this over, is here. And you should be able to see the noticeable color variation there. Now, this one is only slightly darker on the bottom, and the reason for that is that I've chose to do a more shadow color on the bottom. And so basically just leaving this a little bit more shadowed than the top. So hopefully you guys can see that variation as I flip that in the overhead. So again, this will get some more color variance as well. I just wanted to get everything to a level even level platform at this point. Platform pun intended there. So I also have worked on that. There we go. So what we're going to do, as I said, is we're going to just continue working along on the pieces here, just adding some ink, and then like I said, we'll go back in and dry brush and things like that to bring it back up in color. But I want to lay that real deep layer for now, and I haven't done anything like I haven't done too much to this at this point. So basically this is just going to be some base layers that go in and see how quickly it dries, and then we'll go back in and lay some other things. Additionally, what I'm also going to do with that first color of brown is I'm actually going to saturate most of this window area here. I really want that to pool around the window, up here in the top corners, along these edges. These are going to be metallic here. These are going to be brassy color here. We're going to have some bolts and things like that, and then we'll have the wood elements, and then we'll just play around with airbrushing in these actual window flats here. So just bear with me for 1 second. I'm just going to pop back over here to Facecam for a second. I just want to have a look at the stream, making sure everything, just a one-man show here this evening. So of course, I'm just trying to manage everything here. So just bear with me. Feel free to pop into chat, ask any questions that you may have, and then we'll get on with the work. Just logging in here and checking on the links. Hopefully they are appearing somewhere. If you're in chat and you want to give me a quick sound test or check, that would be fantastic. All right, got one live link there, so that's great. All right. All right, well, I think we got some live links working some places, and so we will just roll with that. I'm just going to exit out of that camera for 1 second. If you guys pop in a chat, just give me a sec here. Just rolling. Just waiting on a couple links here. I think some of the pages did not have the links share out, or at least were taking their time, and I might have gone a little bit too fast. So I just want to get this link out because typically we have a bit more of a crowd hanging out with us, and so I want to make sure we're not missing anybody tonight. Go to the TerrainStudio page, make sure we're good there. Excellent, we do. And one last one, so. Fantastic. All right, folks. Fantastic. All right, we're going to jump back over to the table and continue working. All right, so as I said, we're just going to give some really basic layering here of ink. We're going to go with some skeleton horde contrast and start laying this in. I will probably come back and do a little bit of a brown wash over top of the piece where we got the null oil here, but we'll worry about that later. So I'm just going to use this sort of flat brush for this, just to get some contrast down in a little bit of larger and quicker quantity. And again, this is really close to kind of the base layer. I use the base layer on here is one of my favorite colors. It's called Vallejo. It's by Vallejo, I should say, and it's called Dirt. And so it's just dirt. And it's a really kind of cool earthy texture. It's almost like a dried earth. I just really like the neutrality of it, and it's not too dark, it's not too light, and it's easy to just add in some inks and such over it and get a nice working base layer anyway. So all right, I'm gonna just do the bottom portions here first, and then we'll go back up and work on the 45s at the top and the door and the flat panels afterwards. So I'm just going to be really generous with this. I want to make sure I pick up as much of those seams as I can. Again, just trying to drag it to the end. I don't want to really get too much pooling at this point. But I do want to try to pick up as much of the grain as I can. And the reason I didn't like just this is it's a little bit too light when it dries out. And I'll show you what I mean by that, because I have one that I've done already just to show you kind of what it will be like when it's dry. So again, it'll be a little bit weird on camera, but having a look at this, let me see if I can turn that light up for you a bit. Yeah, so if you're having a look here, this is the ones that I just put down, and we'll rotate along, This one is obviously with the null oil here, and then this one next to it is when it dries out, and then this one is the one I just put down. So, and then if I rotate right around here, that's without any on there. So it's not really much different at all, to be quite honest. But it does pick up a little bit of the seam, and it will add a little bit of an undertone, and then the null oil over the top will really start to darken it down, and then we'll pull this back up a little bit. So it's just enough to kind of get a little bit of paint, a little bit of ink rather, into the seams, into the grain, I should say. It does run into the seams between the pieces as well, so that is handy, but really trying to accentuate that that grain. There we go. Somebody else has popped in. Hello. I was worried that the links weren't working. I don't really know. It's just a quiet night tonight, I guess. So, but I said I was going to work on Wednesday, so here I am. Yeah, just using the contrast a lot like an ink here. Not looking to have much actual contrast added, but it's doing the trick. I want to keep this whole, the feel and look of this hut really kind of earthy, so. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, thank you. I do appreciate the sound checks. I usually have somebody kind of here or able to help me, but not so in the COVID era. So, but I do appreciate the compliments. Thank you very much. This has been quite a project. It's labored on, but I decided to really do a lot more with it than I originally intended, and I'm under no time constraint. And in fact, I feel the least rushed ever, because I typically am either working on a deadline or I'm working to somebody else's sort of timeline, trying to not string anybody along, kind of thing. So yeah, it's nice to be able to take my time. So you can see there that I've laid that on, and it's a little bit different than the top portion of the fly. You can see that. Certainly not as contrasty as that. And I do agree, this really looks really deep. And again, it's more of a blackened wood at this point. So don't let that color sort of throw you off. I know it's the most contrast, but it's like anything. The newest thing that you add to something, the most recent thing you do to something always stands out like a sore thumb, because you got to work in the consistency, right? You gotta get this, you got to get everything to flow together. So my apologies if I'm kind of working off camera. I'll try to work a little bit more on the undercam if I'm not quite on the overhead here. So, or vice versa, I guess. So here now what I'm doing is these large panels. I'm just going to go to the top and again just streak it down. Not really too worried about getting it on this abutment here, because that's going to be painted out with more of a metal look. So I'll worry about that later. Streaking it down. I don't really care if it has dark patches or light patches, because again, I want to create some variation amongst the wood anyway. And you will never get any great painting techniques from me. I know how to paint terrain. I don't like painting figs. I can paint. I just really find that it's laborsome and not super enjoyable. So, but it's part of the hobby for sure. But it's a part of the hobby I like to consume as a consumer. I like to see other people's amazing work, and I don't have to be good at it. So. Again, just running that along the top, making sure I get it into as many recesses as I can. Heard a comment pop on there, so let me look at it. Skeleton Horrors, yes, it absolutely is. I'm really liking it, and it plays well with this dirt color here. So seemingly it's gonna do the trick for me. I'm gonna try the null oil wash over the top. If I like it, I'm gonna keep it. If I don't like it, it's kind of an easy reset. I just brush out the bottom panels and I re-contrast them. So I think it'll be all right though, to be perfectly honest. The other option is I have a brown wash to go over it. I'm not sure if it'll look any better. I guess the real ultimate test is I could just do this other dry one and have a look and see. Maybe I will do that just because we're hanging out here, and I got a bunch more of this to brush, so give me a second, I'll grab that. So I have this Vallejo, nope, that's the wrong one. This is the one I'm looking for. So I have Vallejo Dark Brown. This is a wash, not a contrast. And let's just have a look here. Let's pop this onto the panel that is already dry with the skeleton horde, and we'll see what we like. And if we like this one better, then I'm not opposed to going back and painting out that one panel to see. Another option, I guess, is we can always give it a couple layers too. So I'm just brushing that. Again, this is dark brown. Just feel it's not going to be contrasty enough, but nonetheless, I've laid that on there, so it's a little bit, not sure why that camera is not wanting to pick up this light, but so just check. This is, let me rotate this correctly. First panel here, that's the null oil over the skeleton horde. This one is Vallejo Dark Brown over the skeleton horde. This one is just straight skeleton horde. So if I back this up, it gets into the shadow here a little bit, but we'll crank up some light. There we go. That's a bit better. There we go. That was what we needed the whole time. So there you go. So dark, a little bit darker, and then a little bit lighter. I'm not 100% sure which one I'm sold on just yet, but I think I'm probably still going to go with the darker one and probably lighten it up a little bit as opposed to going with that. I think that's just not enough contrast at this point, but we'll check it out. We'll play around with the look. For now, let's swap back over and continue on with the skeleton horde. We got the two flat panels here done. We're just going to let that dry up. We have another flat panel here, so let's go do that. And then we got to do the door, and then we got to do the 45s in the corners. So trying not to get too much contrast on the overhang here of the roof. So I don't want to have to do a lot of cleanup on these sections. And again, terrain's a little bit nicer because it doesn't have to be Golden Demon. It's you can be a little bit more generous, a little bit more maybe broad in your look. Your pieces are larger, so you need to achieve the look. It doesn't need to be necessarily precise with every stroke. So something I like. I mean, there is obviously places that you want to focus your attention and detail on, but the initial layer of contrast is not that step. Contrast, ink, whatever you're using, kind of thing. So again, just brushing some of the longer strokes out here. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking, Matthew, as well. Just kind of put a little bit of that dark down there. Again, keeping in mind we're going to have a little bit of metallic here. We're going to have the brass show up here, and then we're going to ink out the panels anyway, so we're going to have a little bit of the lining show up in the dark, and I kind of want to do the brown wash, and then I kind of want to do the null over everything anyway, and then just really pull that null oil off the flats and just really let it pool. So I'm going to basically do a test panel full out, kind of have one test panel a little bit ahead in steps, and then we'll kind of see what that looks like down the road, kind of thing. So again, you can just always go back and sort of reset, if you will, periodically if you need to. Just go back a couple steps by resetting your dry brush. I have a little bit of paint that I seemingly have taken off here, a little bit of contrast. I guess it was too dry, so I'm going to see if I can lay that back in and sort of blend out that little blemish that I put in there. And then just to even that up, I'll do a little bit more over here, just so it looks like I have some light and dark spots. A little bit of a wider brush here, and I'll just All right, there we go. Okay, so we got single panel done, good. Now we're just gonna move on to the door here, brush some of this in. People have hanging out here. I'm always curious if YouTube shows Facebook viewers, because I have a feeling people that click on Facebook, I don't know if it actually shows up on YouTube, because I think you have to be logged in to show on my YouTube stream. So, but you never know how many people are in here, so doesn't really matter. I'm going to keep working. I just like to make sure I'm acknowledging people. Let's try to make it as interactive as possible. I think you guys can chat if you're not logged into Facebook, but maybe you can't even, so I'm not 100% sure how that all works. YouTube is not new to me. YouTube Live is new to me. And so I'm not really well versed in all the nuances of it. As long as you can see it or watch it later, that's really all you care about. All right, so again, just brushing out that around the door. So it's just getting a little bit of contrast here and there, you know what I mean? Okay, so let me just go back to where I put that brown on, and then I'll say, where I put that brown on. See how contrasting that is? It's so drastic. And by that I mean, which panel did I put the brown on? You can't even tell. So we're gonna go and stick with that. Like it honestly, I don't even need to reset anything because it's basically the same color. So that really didn't do a whole heck of a lot, but let's go to the buttress, the abutment here. So it's got 3 panels of wood backed by the metal. So I'm just going to brush over this first onto the wood, trying to stay off the metal if I can, or at least where the metal's going to go. It's a really cool piece. I really like this addition. If people click on the link from Facebook, they can watch it through YouTube, but have to log in. Ah, okay, gotcha. See, I knew there was something I was missing out. So my apologies if you are clicking via YouTube, Facebook, watching on YouTube, and can't comment. If you want, though, just so they don't miss anything, if you want to throw your comments in the Facebook comment section, although I can't really answer them now unless they're kind of translated over by Matthew, if he's able to do that. I will answer all those or show things. Again, I wish I had somebody here kind of helping to monitor that. So if you got anything burning, throw it in there. If I see it, I'll answer it. If I don't see it, I'll answer it later. That's a guarantee. So my apologies that you have to log in. I try not to make any more steps for people to do anything. I just want you to consume this as you're sitting home, passing the time and doing whatever you're doing kind of thing. So yeah, so some interesting stuff. So I think actually what I have is a little bit of glue on there. It's adding a little bit of variation, so I'm actually okay with that. And if I end up with any blemishes on here, what we'll end up doing is we're going to end up doing some moss effects and some things to kind of make it a little bit more leafy and green. So I think it becomes a great spot to cover that little space up. It's actually, must be a little bit of dried glue on there, so the contrast isn't sort of taking as well as it should, or as well as I'd like, I guess. So I'm just going to come in here now and start painting out some of these 45s. So I'm just going to put a dab and a dab, and then I'll go back and start shifting that around. So again, being as careful as I can, but not being overly concerned if I get a little bit on this or that, or, you know, neighboring piece. I got a little bit of white still showing through here, a little bit of light gray, I guess, where some of these angles were pretty hard to airbrush rather. And so I know I'm going to have a few spots where I'm going to either, mostly it's going to be in areas where ink's going to pool nicely, so we'll really jam the ink in there. And then anything else I need to go and touch up again, those would be great spots to add a little bit of earth or mossy effects, or even just even just some weathering powders and such, which is another thing that I'm a really big fan of. So you'll see me dust this whole piece up. I actually dusted these up considerably, to be quite honest. I did. First I came in with, geez, let me just grab the colors just in case you actually care what the color names are. One for sure is a burnt sienna, which I definitely know. The other one was, natural sienna. So I used the Vallejo pigments here. Basically just a nice dry brush, really, really soft bristle. Scoop it out, dust it on top, like really cake it in, layer it in. Give it a pretty aggressive brush. You're giving it an aggressive brush with, keeping in mind, you're giving it an aggressive brush with a very light brush. So you're not going to tarnish or brandish or scratch or scrape any of this. However, once that was done, then I take a little bit of a stiffer, large brush, like kind of a kabuki brush, almost like a real big and round, and then I just aggressively brush that off. So I'm really trying to jam it into the crevices, and what it does, it gives a really nice dull effect. Now I do dust the sides as well. However, I leave a little bit extra on the top, and then I just quickly dull coat the whole thing. It brings it right back up, so it makes it a little bit poppy, but at the same time, there's no powder or residue coming off here. So I did have one more test that I wanted to do. I realized I had one more color of ink that I could potentially try, and I don't know if I want to because it's pretty aggressive. That at the same time I think I do, so I'm going to grab it and we're going to try it. If I don't like it, then we'll do some fixing, but let me just show you what it looks like. So this is a Liquitex transparent burnt sienna, so it's very, very deep and rich. So it does quite a number in terms of inking. So it's not necessarily a point of no return, but I'm interested to see what it might look like. And I think where I'm going to try it, just because I think that if I don't like it, it's one place where it's neutral enough that I can add a little bit of variation, and that's actually this buttress right here. Because this is kind of standalone, it's a one-off location. If it ends up being a little bit of a different color, or it ends up having a little bit of a different look, I think that would be enough to sell it in the overall look. So I'm curious. I know this is really, really deep, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Actually, let's just take a piece of wood. It's not going to be the wood we're using, but matter of fact, let's just use the wood we are using, because I can grab a piece of the stick. This is impromptu, but let me grab a stick. Now keep in mind, this is not going to be over. This is not going to be over the dirt base layer, but let me show you this. So we're going to take the stick and we're going to first brush just a skeleton horde. We're going to brush it right in, like so. And we're going to let that run out. Here we go. Grab a little paper towel. Okay, next on the stick, this is drying by the way, but this will be the wet look. There we go. Okay, next we're going to take some null oil, and you guys have probably seen this stuff. So this isn't going to be real like hot take or big reveal here or anything, but I want to just kind of show you what it is I'm thinking about. So then there's null oil over it. So again, you can see how it really darkens that wood down. So you can imagine that over the skeleton horde. With this, it really dulls it down, and it puts a, well, tell you the truth, it looks exactly like that right there. Okay, so then let's go to the burnt sienna, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. Now this Liquitex is pretty strong ink. It's very concentrated. Get some viewer feedback here. There we go. So that is what that looks like. It's right here by my finger. So this is the reddish look. There's the skeleton horde, and then we have the null oil here in the middle. And so I don't know if that's just too contrasting here, that reddish color. You know, you guys think about that. Now, granted, that's not over top of a dirt color, so it's going to be a little bit darker if I were to put it over here. I can, again, like I said, just brush it over that, but might be getting ahead of myself in terms of I don't want to steer too far off my my original path, but this is kind of where my mind's going right now, that potentially we got some ability to put some different colors down here. So, all right, let me just continue on with the skeleton horde, because this is something that I know I'm going to do. But feel free to give me some feedback in the chat. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking, that it might be too red. And I think I'd be willing to just give this an overall look first with the plan, with the dark. And then if I need to bring it up a little bit. I mean, the beauty about really anything, just like with minis, is you can always reset with a primer coat. You know, you're never that far removed from, and I'm not opposed to ever going back, right? I'm not going to sacrifice a look. You know, even with those pieces I showed you before, like I went down that path with the black and the darker lines. Well, that's a piece of terrain where effectively I don't need to rebuild the whole structure, but I got to recoat it. I got to cover it again, and I got to start again on that color journey. But in doing so, I figured out where I did want to go. So it's not a wasted effort. Same thing with making the buttresses, right? I made, took me several hours to cut them and kind of get down that path. And then when I started putting them together, what it made me realize is that I didn't like that look. And so if I spend a little bit of time figuring out things that I don't like, I don't consider that to be a waste at all. That's part of learning. Now, if I want to use them for something else, if I want to use that look somewhere else, it's not a lost look. It just didn't work well for the piece. So that burnt sienna, I tried that on some panels, on some hide panels, and it was too dark on there. Now, will it be too dark for the wood? Who knows? But I may want to try it, just to either rule it out or make a fantastic find. Go. Well, I guess if you're watching on Facebook and you aren't necessarily subscribed to my YouTube channel, you could always do that. That would help you out. Do you find that you lose any detail on the terrain piece when you reprime to correct? I mean, I don't, let me just clarify, I don't find myself repriming a lot. I'm just indicating that as a reset method that you could do. For example, resetting this to be back to where I was involved me actually covering it with paper mache, not painting again. So this one here, no, it's just going to be exactly reset to where I was. It's a little bit of time, of course. Repainting this guy, To be quite honest, when I say reprime, I don't think I need to reprime it. What I would end up doing is basically repriming those bottom panels over the wood, maybe fill the grain in a little bit more than it is now, but I wouldn't have to reprime everything. I'm just saying that's a reset method that you can use when you are when you're working on terrain. It's hard to strip it like you might strip a mini, but you can always put a nice light layer of prime coat back over it. So I use that to me a fine white primer very often. This one I did in Vallejo, but however I do often use that, and that one does have a little bit of a filler in it. So I actually didn't do it on this one to not purposely fill in the grain, but if I didn't have wood grain on it, I would have used that, and it goes down quite in a light coat. So repriming with that wouldn't necessarily be a real big issue. So, okay, so we have everything laid down with the first layer. So I'm actually not going to wait on this to dry. I'm going to come right back in with the null oil just to lay it right over the contrast. I don't need the contrast to dry in order to do this. I'm not really. I actually prefer to have the wood a little bit saturated and have this soak in a little bit better. Let me just give this a better shake here. So. Yeah, just suggesting that a prime coat is a way to reset. Don't feel you have to rebuild anything or anything like that. That's the nice thing about scratch building, is that you build it once, so you can always build it again, and that's really a nice feeling to have. There's always that kind of bailout step, if you will. So. Okay, I also wanted to put this caveat in here. I'm going to mention it in all my videos, so please just take this as exactly as I entail it. So the Kashyyyk build right now is occurring 100% for free. All these videos are public. Everyone can see everything. This is a Patreon only build. However, I did say due to the coronavirus, I wanted to do a full month of all free, all public videos. So right after Easter, which is approaching, sadly, all of the videos for this project will move entirely to Patreon. I don't think that's like a dirtbag move by me, please. This is where it started, so you haven't seen the first few videos. They're actually in Patreon as well. So this video will move over, and I'll contrast, move this entirely over there. I'll still do some live builds as well. I'll just be working on some different projects. So if you are interested in following this, this is a little bit of a plug for the TheTerrainStudio. Please check out the Patreon. It's $5 a month. It gets you everything that I do on there, and you can get all the access to all the old stuff. But just to be very clear, after Easter, you won't see me working on this. I am going to continue, but I just want to make sure that's very clear. I have some other stuff that I want to do, and I'll be working with you guys on stream. I got some figs I need to base. I got a display board I want to work on. So you guys will see lots of content from the studio. Just this project will move back there, and that's a thing for my patrons. They were gracious enough to allow this month to occur, and they did not abandon me on the studio, which is fantastic. I have very good retention for the patrons on there, and I have them to thank for all the stuff that you guys are seeing happen. So I just want to get that plug in, and I need to do it every episode. So if I forget, please remind me. All right, that's out of the way. That's the housekeeping, and now we're going to go back and start laying in this null oil here. So we're going to really darken up these sections. I'm just really self-conscious that I'm like trying not to pull the plug on people with the videos. So okay, that's fantastic. That actually makes me feel better. So I generally reveal a lot of stuff in the end, months down the road, what have you, and I try to do a lot of free content as well. It's just this is a business for me as well, and when I'm not doing a commission piece, I still have to cover off all the costs of streaming and hosting and using the software that I do, and of course I'm always trying to improve the content and quality of the videos, so I'm always purchasing something to do that. So I do appreciate any support you guys are able to give, and just watching is support, so just to be very clear. So again, this I'm not really going with a super saturated coat. I'm just laying in that null oil over it, and you can really see how quickly that contrasts and darkens that down. It's just going to be really, really deep coloration there. We'll get a little bit more at the top, And then I think with the brass, it's gonna really pop, and we'll have these couple lighter panels in there. And then we'll have the window, and we'll kind of play around with the color. Probably that inside recess will keep a little bit darker, and then we'll lighten it up as we go. And then this upper panel here will have the most contrast, or most light contrast, I should say. So, and I'm not sure if I want to, how I exactly want to lighten this back up. I thought actually just about coming in and maybe just airbrushing it a little bit lighter to bring it up. I could also dry brush it a little bit, and so I'll probably play around a little bit with that in terms of how exactly I'm going to make that pop back up. I don't really like to dry brush a lot. I think I've said that before. I don't like the look of it. I just find it comes across a little bit too uniform. Sometimes it does have its place though, so I don't want to rule it out. It's just I don't like to use it a lot. Just popping in some of this null oil in between, really focusing on the cracks between the boards, and then wherever it sort of pools and pops on the wood is fine by me. So hitting the edges, streaking it towards the middle, and then just pulling it back wherever I need to kind of move some pools around. Again, I'm using a brush that's about as wide as the one board, and there's 3 there, so that's really nice to just keep the brush strokes in between the boards and not really super visible on the wood itself. I'm not sure, Mark, if you're able to, or Mark, I'm not sure, Matthew, if you're able to see any Facebook comments, but if you happen to come across any, you want to translate or relay, that'd be fantastic. I don't know if there are any, but I'm just saying, if you happen to see any pop up, or if you got any more questions yourself, I'm more than willing to answer any. I think as you said, you're working a night shift, so probably have actual work to do too. You must have been deemed essential by someone. Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm also curious what paint I might use to highlight them. I might just, like, to be honest, I might just go back to the dirt color and then maybe pop it up with a little bit of a sand or something around the beige type color, just to bring it up a little bit. I think the straight dirt might not be enough contrast, but I may be able to hit that and then go a little bit lighter after that. So not 100% sure. So I don't really decide on my palettes too much. I like to kind of organically work at it, and that's why I like doing a lot of test pieces. I didn't actually, what I'll end up doing, to be 100% honest, is I'm going to grab a couple of these sticks and I'm just going to airbrush them dirt. And then what I'll do is I'll basically, just like I've done here, I'll null oil out a couple over top of them, and then what I'll do is just do like airbrush this a certain color, ink this another color, airbrush this another color, dry brush this, and I'll just do some test samples there, and then I'll just work from there. I think I'm settled out that I really like the start of this, and I think this is enough of a working palette for me. But before I go too far down that road, again, this was really easy for me to do on stream tonight, to be perfectly honest. But that's exactly what I'll do. I'll do a lot of test pieces. I talk about test pieces. I can't stress enough to do test pieces. That being said, you aren't going to scratch build out everything. Like, this is a pretty extreme test piece, to be perfectly honest. However, I needed to have something that was like this to be able to start on, to see how big the lines were going to be, to see what coloration I was going to do. Again, I tested out high colors. I tested out the obviously the panel lines that I painted in. I tested out the if I can use my words, the pigments. So I tested like several things on here. So I don't look at this as a lost cause at all. I look at this as, hey, I figured out how to do these from this, and so now I just need to go back and fix this one. I wouldn't typically build out everything. I'm not building like one hut and then test painting that and then, oh, now I'll just build another hut. But I can do certain elements on this. So I think you guys will agree. This looks a heck of a lot better than it did a week ago when it was a dog food dish and we had no panels, no nothing on it. It's getting there. So I'm not disappointed in any regard of where it's gotten to. So, but before I go too far with that, I will definitely test paint out some of the wood pieces, test out some of the brass rod. I can just grab some plastic and do that. So there's lots of elements of this that I'll be able to test before I have to do this, but I want to get a working palette effectively, so that I have something to know what I'm testing against. So you can already see the color contrast just in the airbrushing that I've done. Where the brass rods are going to go, there's already those light panels in there just on the nature of the plastic. The wood at the bottom's dark now, so it's got a really cool effect going on there. That being said, of course, we're going to pop that on here, and so it's going to have to play and tie in nicely with this as well, right? This is going to be the ultimate look that we're going for. And then again, along the bottom here, we're going to run another piece of plastic. So even the bottom's going to have a little bit more of a contrast color going on. So there's going to be all kinds of things playing with each other. So really want to make sure that this is going to play nice. And in order to know it's going to play nice, I'm going to have to do some testing. I'm not going to just immediately know because I'm painting it in isolation, and then I'm bringing the elements together. So that's kind of an important consideration to make is, what does everything look together? Again, I'm just playing with this stuff here too. Is this too red compared to this? Or is it enough of a contrast? Or should it have contrast? So there's all kinds of pieces on here that I'm playing with. And not to mention, we got a ginormous tree that we really got to play with because it's going to be a deep brown, and we're going to bring that up. I want to bring some grays in the bottom and then bring it to a little bit more vibrant at the top. But then I got to tie in some green, some moss, and there's a ton of stuff. So really, I think that no matter what palette I go with, there's going to be enough forgiveness in the color choice that I'm going to be able to make it work, at least look halfway decent. And then, by the way, there's going to be figs on this, and probably nobody will pay attention to any of this stuff anyway. So I feel good in the end that truthfully it's going to be somebody's better painted models that people are actually going to be looking at, and probably none of the work that I'm doing right now. So I take solace in the fact that I will not have the most interesting stuff on the table. The figs will be. So we're going to just come in here and paint out the few panel pieces on this buttress. That was my answer to your palette question, by the way. So although I have not thought about the palette, I have thought about how everything's going to play together. Just exactly what that's going to look like, I do not know. All right, just getting this working. I'm not sure if you guys can see much in the overhead. You can see a little bit in the overhead, I guess. All right, heard another question pop up, comment rather. Yeah, that's fair. Truthfully, there's a harmonious synergy that occurs between nice terrain and nice models. Really bad terrain, I shouldn't say that, scratch that, that sounds elitist. Different terrain in terms of like production quality or unpainted stuff, which you'll occasionally use, does make nicely painted models look a little bit worse. nicely painted terrain, really hobbied up terrain with unpainted models sitting on it, also, to be honest, detracts from the terrain. So there is definitely this synergy that occurs. And again, I don't care if you use unpainted terrain or unpainted models. I don't actually care. I like the game and I like to play it. So I'll never kind of create that barrier to enjoyment. However, when they're both nice and they are blended together, there's nothing more intriguing or interesting about a hobby or to get people into a hobby than really good and nice looking tables with terrain. I love going to conventions. I love walking around. I have good restraint because I know that I invest all my money into Legion and into terrain making. However, if I didn't have good restraint, I could probably walk up to any convention table where people are playing a game, and I'm the type of guy, I will be sucked in if I don't have that little bit of self-restraint. Arena Rex, Warhammer, Lord of the Rings, Infinity, War Machine, they all look amazing when they have that really harmonious synergy of nice terrain and nice models, and I could be sucked in so easily if I didn't have something already sucking all of my money out of me. So yeah, well, thanks for that, Matthew, and welcome, Brian. Yeah, it is starting to look like something. So I'm always joking about it. You know, let's not forget, if you're just joining us for tonight, and I keep this around just for this reference. This is what we started with. This is where we've gotten to. We aren't there yet, but it does look better than a dog food dish. So, and it does start to get a little bit of it's starting to get a little bit of color on it, which always makes it a little bit nicer. By the way, if you're curious about the roof, my thought for the roof, and here's another reason, and I should kind of share this with you, Matthew, and those that are watching, and my apologies, I know Brian and Matthew are watching. I don't know how many Facebook folks we got, but welcome and hello. The red in the sienna might play a little bit too much with the roof. So what I want to do with the roof is I kind of actually want to come in with a more of a rusty color. And I think the rust color plays really well with a greenish moss buildup. And so I'm going to probably use something like a saddle brown or just straight brown, which is actually red in the Vallejo. It's kind of got like a reddish tinge to it. And I really think that something like that would look nice. I can also use rust effects in the brown, not as rust, but as some nice color variation in there to really pop some reds. And so I think I want to go with that. So now if I don't have any red down here, I think that the contrast will look really nice. And by contrast, I mean straight up stark contrast between the two. If I'm tying in the red elements down here, it might look a little bit more or too thematic. And I think I want to stay away from that. I think I really want to make the roof on this pop. Keep in mind as well, we're going to bring kind of this color into here. And so it has a little bit of a reddish tinge to it already. And I think that that'll play well with the look of the roof too. So yeah, excited for that. Okay, so we got the 45s, I think, done. Did I finish those? Yeah, I think I did. Yep. And so now what I'm going to do is come in and start painting out the large panels. I got the buttress done. I'm going to come in and start painting out the flats here. So yeah, I guess I can just hold it like that. And maybe I'm just going to swap over brushes here and go with this slightly larger one. Again, just playing along the top there, trying to keep as much off the roof overhang as I can. Probably not going to do a lot with that, to be honest. I might just tone it down a little bit with the ink layer after, but not doing too much with it. Really want to get not a lot of saturation on here, but I do want to put a larger pool on here so I can kind of pull it around. And again, I'm okay to have some areas a little bit darker, some areas a bit lighter. And so for that, I'll just kind of keep bringing my brush up and blending out that area that was a little bit lighter from before. A little bit build up down here. Go. And we'll build, this wood will really play nice too when we put a little bit of the green the weathering effect in it. So we'll come in with a little bit of the ink, and we'll touch around the bottoms and a little bit around the top as well, because we want to make sure that this wood still has a little bit of life, kind of almost either in it or on it. And I think the green will play nicely with that too. And the green will go a little bit nicer with the darker black or darker color, because it won't be as poppy, and we don't want that life to be too vibrant. I mean, the tree's not still growing as it's on the building, but we want to have a little bit of maybe a little bit of life still clinging to the outside of it or deposited on it. And I think the green will play better with the darker color than it will the light. Just gonna pop a little bit more black just on here, just in a few spots, then move it around a little bit. Again, I'm just using my brush to kind of streak that down. I'm trying not to leave too many lines or deposits. You can also bring that in there. You can just release it. It's obviously a little bit wet and fresh, but you can kind of see how that's starting to give us a little bit of contrast. So keep in mind, these blank panels are primarily going to face a tree branch, and so a lot of this won't be visible anyway, but we don't paint anything as if you're not going to see it. We build it to function like that. We didn't want to invest a lot in a window that's going to face a tree branch. Doesn't make any sense. However, we're going to paint this up as if it's the most prominent. It's the front door. It's the first thing you're going to see. We want to put that detail in there because that way it's not going to detract. We don't know what angle you're going to photograph or look or anything like that, so we want to make sure that everything is treated like it's the most prominent section. So I am just curious if I had done all these 45s. I feel like I did, but maybe I didn't. Go back in the footage. Somebody remind me, did I 45? Did I black out any of the 45s? I feel like I didn't. Somebody tell me that in the footage. I can't even remember it. Talking too much here. I feel like I haven't. And matter of fact, if I haven't, looks really good. The black looks good. The random brush strokes, yep. Okay, Matthew, you'll be able to tell me, did I paint any of those 45s out with that or not? I feel like I didn't because I feel like it's still light. Well, the only solution is to go paint them all, and then that way they'll all be even. I don't think I did. I think I skipped that step. Oh, what's going on here? Fair enough. We're going back in. Well, before we get there, we'll go do the other blank panel, which I know I didn't do, but rewind the tape. You did one panel next to the one you just did. Okay, on the 45s. Yeah, and I'm going to guess that it was this one right here. Good call. We'll go back and do that in a second. But we're going to paint out this 45 here, or this flat panel first. See? You guys are awesome. Paying attention, more attention than me. I guess I would have seen that when everything came out to dry. So yeah, we're going to, while I'm thinking about this, to be perfectly honest, I'm looking at this and I'm trying to envision what's it look like 5 steps ahead from now. To be perfectly honest, by the way, I just took a little bit of contrast, or a little bit of ink off my brush there. So if you find that you're getting too much pooling, don't be afraid to just tap it off in a paper towel, and then you can come back and just wick up the excess, and then start the streaks all over again. I think, quite honestly, what I can do, and again, I'll do this on the test piece first, but I think if I come in with a little bit of pigment, I'll actually be able to brush up this. And the nice thing about the pigment will actually be one of the best things to settle into some of the some of the cracks and the grain. And so if I actually dust this, it'll pick really nicely up in these crevices and cracks, and I'll be able to dust the whole panel, and I'll actually be able to control a little bit more where I have the buildup. And then when I set that in there, all I have to do is come in with a little bit of pigment fixer, and in fact, dull coat will fix the pigment just fine. Dull coat that over, and then what the dull coat's going to do is it's going to give me a nice protective layer. Then when I come in and start working with my enamels, I'm able to deposit, because I'll probably do a little bit of the moss deposit with enamel as opposed to acrylic. Then when I come in, then I can use white spirits, and I can actually start pulling off and moving and manipulating some of that moss a little bit easier. It's almost going to float on top of the dull coat, and the white spirits will allow me to sort of extract any heavy accumulations. And so that'd be a really neat step as well. I have an actual tutorial on the Patreon that I did on the rust. And so let me grab the piece real quick, because I think you guys would be interested in seeing that, just so, because I'm talking a little bit ahead of where I am at, and so I'll just show you, because that's what I like to do. Hey Mark, how's it going? Thank you for joining here. We got 4 people hanging out. Fantastic. I was a little bit concerned before because I didn't know if people were finding me, but seemingly Matthew has explained that if you are on Facebook and you're not on YouTube, it just won't show as a viewer. So welcome. But this is what I want to show you guys here. So hopefully that is showing up okay on camera. So this panel right here, I did a whole tutorial on this on the Patreon so you can see it. But this has a combination of rust effects and some chipping effects and some weather effects and all kinds of fun things. But what you can really see is that this panel, what I did was I base coated it, then I gave it a full ink bath, let that dry, and then the rest of it was primarily a buildup of both pigment and some enamels that I again manipulated with white spirits. And so you can really see how the deposits of the rust really fill out some of these crevices and cracks, and are able to make some neat accumulations in some different places. And the further back I get, I think the effect starts to become a little bit more evident. I'll hold that up in the close cam for you guys as well, so you guys can see what that looks like there. Go a little bit closer. There you go. Yeah, so that's kind of the thought process, is that if I come in here and just treat this with some weathering powders, I can probably pick up and create some variation really nicely on that wood. And not only that, but it'll actually carry through the whole panel itself and really start to make those things pop. Then on top of that, then I can come in and paint out that brass and that metal, and then come back in and do a little bit of treatment on the metal as well. Obviously I don't want to come in and brush out the brown all over the metal. I'll brush in the brown first, and then the areas where I'm going to put the metal, I'll just paint right over that. So it might look a little like maybe the metal has a bit of accumulation, things like that, but it won't have a brown coloration. So that might be one of the fun things that I can actually do. So the more and more I explain this to you guys, the more and more I'm feeling a bit more confident in my initial plan of attack here. So nothing like a little bit of hobby chat to get everyone motivated. So myself included. All right, so let's come back in and actually paint the 45s. And when I'm saying 45s, I just mean these 45-degree pieces of wood here in the corners. Just develop my own little terrain lingo here, talking about, you know, the buttresses and the 45s and the brass rods. And I mean, I realize all that makes sense in my brain, but it could be gibberish to you guys. Most of what I say probably is anyway. So just occasionally follow what I'm doing and skip the rest. Well, fantastic. Well, there you go, Matthew. We'll consider this a successful episode here. If I can give people motivation, a lot of people,
I guess don't necessarily understand sort of my approach to the business. So I'm not sure what that was. It just popped up on computer. Fair enough. Somebody sent me a message another way. Um, the like this is not an advertisement for things for people to buy. In my business, I don't actually have anything that people can buy. I don't sell any product or have stock of anything. Um, First and foremost, I'm a commission terrain maker. So when I have commissions, that's what I work on, but that's one-on-one with customers. But I do these videos and I do these chats and things as purely a motivation thing. I'm not expecting anyone to build a Kashyyyk table. That's not the point of any of this. The point of this is to inspire people, to problem solve with people, to motivate people, to troubleshoot things for people, that sort of stuff. So the more I can do that, the better. That's actually a motivating factor for me. Um, Ultimately, I'm not going to sell a table to everyone, and that's not the intent. The intent is to basically gain mutual benefit from sharing my passion and working with other people as they explore theirs. So that's the true philosophy of the Terrain Studio. So I'm really pleased and happy to hear you. You say you got some motivation to start a project that you've been wanting to start. That's fantastic. And hopefully other people are in the same boat, right? And even if it's not inspiring you to like build a terrain table, that's not the point. Maybe it's to paint that thing that you were, you know, putting off, or maybe it's that I'm going to put those things together that I have not put together yet, or I'm going to start thinking about a project that I have no idea how to approach, but now I got an idea. That sort of stuff is what I'm looking to give people. I mean, if you got a dog food dish laying around and you just felt that you needed to make a hut out of it, then I'm your guy. I'm directly your guy. But it's not rush out and buy a dog food dish to make a Kashyyyk hut. Okay, that's what we got done. What time is it here? All right, so we'll go for about another 30 minutes probably or so. I have a really sore shoulder for some odd reason. I knew I didn't like painting. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just come in and work on the door piece here. That's the next section. Grab this brush. Twitch the other one there, just softening up the bristles a bit. There's a little bit of glue that's run down. Let me show you this right here. Right, it's a little hard to see, but right in there's a little glue drip. And so that'll definitely just be something that just gets covered over with, either a moss strip or like a rust streak, or, because maybe a little bit of rust has come off the roof, or not necessarily rust, but a little bit of, environmental accumulation, as I like to call it. That may be a reddish color just because of the roof, but don't worry about any mistakes or errors or spots. It's like, oh, that's a little darker than I wanted it to be, or those are the easiest spots to fix. And because your mistakes are likely random and unintentional, your cover-ups will be random and unintentional, and so they actually look like they are very strategically placed in terms of they look awesome. But that's only because you're really trying to cover up things that you accidentally did. And the placement of those accidents are usually in very prominent areas. That's just the nature of terrain making, those laws. And so when you make those little corrections, they typically come out looking pretty good, because you're able to really focus on covering up something. And because of that, you've put a lot of attention into it. At least that's my philosophy around it. I will oftentimes have something that's an error or just a mistake, right? It's like, you know, that happens. You know, I spill a little paint here, or man, I went a little too thick here, and then you just come in and you're forced to make it look good again. So there you go. We're starting to get a little bit of color on there, and it's not earth-shattering at this point, but I think that it's starting to give our building a little bit of a profile. And truthfully, that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to add a little bit of interest to this. We're trying to create a little bit of contrast and color, and just make it look good. So one of the things that we have to do to this top piece here is we got to give it a base layer of a sepia wash. And so I'm going to do that, even though we're going to add a little bit of extra accoutrements and some antennas and things like that. We'll come in and do that just because we got a little bit of time to kill. And I'll just show you that that's super quick and easy, and nothing fantastic or special about that process either. But might as well do that now. So just bear with me. I'm going to grab that. Okay, so I'm going to be using for this one, I'm using, again, a Vallejo product. This is actually Game Color Wash, and it's called Levedo Sepia, or Sepia, however you want to pronounce that. So this is actually an immersion dip. So as a result, it's quite a concentrated ink. And it comes in this really large bottle, and it comes in a black. I think it's a Levedo black. And then the sepia, I really like this. I use it for, it's really a generic all-around good wash. And in fact, it may end up being the wash that I kind of coat this entire thing with, just because A, it's expensive to use these ones here or these ones just to do that whole area. So I may end up using the immersion dip, and it tends to kind of like dry and splotch, and has a real kind of unrefined finish, and that's primarily how you put it on. But I really like it because it creates some weird color variations within that. That's actually how I ended up doing these originally. And if you want to look at it in a little bit more of a pure form, excuse me, this is actually what it looks like directly applied. So you can see here, I put it on, and I put this on with a foam brush. And so when I put it on with a foam brush, the foam brush is going to have, obviously, it's not going to leave your brush strokes. And when I put it on, I typically will just let it sit for a few minutes, and then I start sort of tapping it off or tamping it off, either with a little bit of a cloth or a paper towel, just to kind of give it a weird variation. So for this top piece here, I'm probably just going to lay it on for the most part. I try not to get any on the roof either, so I'm going to have to manage it a little bit better. And so as a result, I'm not going to use a foam brush to do it. I'm just going to use a paintbrush to do it. So typically for the immersion dip, you won't shake this. It'll just basically say don't shake. However, because it's very concentrated, I like to get a little bit of the pigment off the bottom. And into the top here a little bit more. And of course, it's not really that great for your brushes because you have to dip them so deep. That's going to get in the fennel. These are really cheap brushes, and I typically won't use anything expensive for terrain anyway. I'm just going to go ahead and start brushing this on, keeping it more towards the top at this point, just because I want to control the drip. Paint over the top. And another thing that you'll achieve is you'll notice that because I shook it, I'm going to get quite a few bubbles in it. The bubbles are actually going to be part of the look in terms of how it's going to give you kind of that splotchy finish, because they'll dry in a little bit different, and they'll have kind of rings around them, and so you'll get kind of a unique look with that. In addition, we have the paper mache with the hide, the simulated hide, and so a lot of the lines will either soak up some of the ink or trap some of the ink, and so you'll get these really cool buildups in these areas as well. And so all that's going to end up lending to the look here. And again, I'm brushing it up towards the top as opposed to down, just so I can control the drip. And I realize you guys probably can't see too much of that, but hopefully you're seeing a little bit of it. One of my next purchases, and I'm working on it both with Legion Academy as well as the Patreon, is we're going to get a third M50. I have two, but I don't like to move the face camera that much because it's just, I have to swap lenses and it just gets problematic to move it. Stuff around the studio, my whole goal is to not have to move things. So I would like to add an additional cam. So I have this one, but then have one that's really focused on exactly like a subject cam that's a little bit stronger and more powerful. And so that's gonna be something I'm looking forward to adding, just so I can zoom in on this exact stuff and you guys can see everything that's going on. So again, just brushing that to the top, making sure I got good coverage. So then typically what I'll do is I'll come with like a paper towel and then just hit it just ever so lightly. And what this does, it takes off the excess, it pops any bubbles, and then just starts giving it a really nice variation in the look. And then if I think like, oh, you know what, I need a little bit more there, I took a little bit too much off. In this case, I just wanted more on there. Then I can just put more on, brush it out at the same time. Looks pretty good. Tap, 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 burst any of those bubbles, move any of that stuff around. There we go. Yeah, so there we go. And then I'll show you what that looks like. It's going to dry up a little bit darker than it is right now, and just start to pop the top a little bit here, if you will. So again, you can see some of that hide. Again, it's very wet, but you'll get the idea that we're going to have a little bit of that reddish tinge to it again with the sepia, and I think the roof's going to play really nice with that roof cap. So, and again, that just ties into the look that we have going on here and the bottom of the other platforms. This particular structure right here is actually going to have hide covering on the reverse end, so it's actually going to be hide all here. And so that'll really play well as well. And that's going to have some banding on it, some metallic banding and some cross hatching and things like that. So this one's going to have a little bit of a different look. However, it's going to still have that hide kind of carried through the entire process. We also have some of the landing platforms as well. They're going to be hide covered, and that's going to be tied in to the look there. So yeah, so fairly pleased with what we got done this evening. Again, all basic, really basic stuff, but I did spend a little bit of time airbrushing this today, just kind of getting it set for this evening's session. I think once we start adding a bit more contrast and color, it'll come to life a bit more, but I am pretty pleased with where we're at. And I think we've picked some pretty good colors. In combination with your suggestions and my own musings, we arrived at something. I did also want to talk a little bit about a new discovery that I made this week, and it's not a new discovery by any means, and maybe you're going to say, I've been using that stuff for years, it's the best, but I haven't, and so it's new for me, and I wanted to share it. But you guys will know that I have a little bit of a love affair with Weld Bond. I talk about it a lot. They don't sponsor my channel by any means, but I do talk about Weld Bond a lot. I see my wife is live in the studio audience here. Hi.
Hi.
Do you need something?
No.
Okay, bye. She's just staring at me as I'm talking about my love affair with Weld Bond, and she felt a little jealous there, I think, momentarily, but it's a different kind of love. It's a love for a product that I like to use. But that being said, Weld Bond has its limitations in the sense that when you're bonding materials together, foam to MDF or even layers of foam, one of the things I've talked about is the fact that the PVA takes or requires air, and it needs to have evaporation to properly cure and seal. Now, typically with the foam, you'll have enough airflow in there because it doesn't necessarily sit perfectly flat. Or you're able to leave it long enough that you can have some drying or some surface drying at least. Now, one of the things that I've run into a few times is the fact that potentially I'll laminate something together, but then I'll be cutting into the inside of a tree, for example. And so the more you cut in, if you get to some of those inner exposed areas, you may have a little bit more wet glue. So it's not necessarily the best. Another thing that I discovered is some of these plastics that I'm working with, either the bottle plastic or even these plastic dishes, they don't really lend well to super glue. Using your super glue to work a bit quicker. However, the weld bond doesn't dry fast enough in order for it to have enough of a seal. So you got to either laminate something on top of it or put weight on it or tape it down. And sometimes that doesn't necessarily solidify things in the right orientation, or you have a little bit of slide or slump, or maybe the glue is just too thick. So then I started looking for alternatives for primarily gluing foam to MDF and what that would look like. I also wanted to look for something that was a little bit nicer to laminate things together. Now I've come up with a spray adhesive and I've used that, and that tends to work pretty good. However, that requires some prep work in terms of glue coating the foam first, foam coating the foam first, or painting the foam is a little bit of I'd say a slack-jawed approach. It's a bit of a quicker fix. It's not necessarily the best fix. It's kind of in a pinch, it'll work if you put a couple layers of paint. However, what I was looking for and what I found was this. It's LePage's contact cement. The green one is just a low odor. You can get it in it's more expensive by low odor. I just have really susceptible nasal cavity to all things that aren't pleasant, and so the low odor stuff's a little bit more expensive. It's the green label, but it's awesome. This stuff here, I did some tests on it, and basically what you do is it's got a little bit of a glue applicator. You spread that on one side, you spread it on the other, you leave it 30 minutes, you slam it together, and man, does it ever make a fantastic bond. I actually did the bonding of this here to this plastic, and now I attempted to super glue it 3 times, and every time it just got so brittle that it broke right off, and it wasn't giving me a really nice bond. I contacted cement that, and it held instantly. I put that on, I started working with this and layering all the other layers on, and so that was a fantastic discovery. Now, I also discovered that it works very good to bond foam to MDF, and one of the reasons that I wanted to do that is because when you're laying it over a large piece of foam, over a 3x3, it's really great if you get the surface or the edges rather sealed. The foam, though, as you run it over a large expanse, you guys have heard me say this before, it tends to have a little bit of a vault to it. So you've got to apply weight. Now that's great if you get your weight and it's all evenly distributed and you can get it to solidify, that's fine. However, if you ever have any heat or changes in variation, sometimes what you can get is a little bit of a delamination. Then if you get a delamination, you'll get a little bit of vaulting, and you may have a little bit of sponge that happens with your foam, which you don't really want. One of the things that I had to also worry about is I'm going to have a tree plunk down in the middle of my foam. And so I'm going to have to cut into the foam afterwards. And so I was looking for a solution that, how do I know that when I put this down, everywhere is equally dry when I do so? And I think the contact cement is going to get me around that. So really, really good find there. Another nice thing with it is that contact cement doesn't really have the water content that the weld bond does or other PVAs do. And so again, with that need for evaporation, when you're applying that to MDF, what you'll have is you'll have some seepage into the MDF. You're going to have some natural seepage into because MDF, although it's very dense, it is very porous because it's made of particles. And so when the MDF gets saturated with the glue and it dries, if it's thin, it will pull it up and you'll get warping. We've all discovered this. You know how much I hate it. Seams, warping, dislike, all of it. With contact cement, you're not going to get that, or you should have a massive reduction of that in terms of warpage. So what I'm doing is a little bit of a test on this project. I went a little bit thinner on the MDF. I went to 1/2 inch instead of the 5/8 or 3/8, 5/8 is typically what I do. So I went a little bit thinner. I also want to experiment with how thin I can run. So I have a lot of 3 mil thick MDF bases. And typically I use those for scatter. You've seen them for the Kashyyyk Project. You've seen them for the world tables, those things. Those are all done, again, with a foam layer on top. And I use the foam to kind of mitigate the warping, and then I put the the weld bond on top of that, just to mitigate the amount of water content that seeps into the MDF. It doesn't absorb into the foam, and typically it evaporates and goes up into the air, and we never see it again. However, what ends up happening is you take a really thin piece and you have to make it artificially thick just to account for that. Now I'm going to try and see if I can keep it at 3 mil and do the contact cement. If I can do that, I think that we can lay down some really nice flat pieces of area terrain and get some really interesting pieces that don't necessarily have a artificial thickness to them. They don't all have to have a vaulting of material, and I can keep them nice and flat. And why do I want to have a flat piece? Well, if I'm doing anything desert-like or swamp-like, I don't want to have a raised up piece of area terrain. I want to have a flat piece. So I think, again, that contact cement's going to get around it. So as much as I love weld bond, it's fantastic. It's useful for many, many things, including you can do water effects with it. But I think the new and better solution for gluing that foam to the MDF to avoid any of that warping is contact cement. So give it a try. This one's made by LePage. There's all kinds of them. Like I said, this is the green label, low odor, so I can work here and not die. So that's quite important for me. And yeah, I do like this. It was relatively cheap as well, but not as cheap as like straight PVA. Weld bond is also not cheap, but it's a constructive grade adhesive, and so the water content of this is a bit lower anyway. However, that being said, the pull value of this, the ability to basically press things together, is super strong. So sometimes weld bond is too strong, and it will actually, as opposed to warping the MDF, if you glue something down and it's got a little bit of a vault to it. So let's say I glue a piece of foam down and the foam is a little bit vaulted like this. If I flatten the foam down to the MDF, sometimes what happens is I'll get a little bit of lifting as it dries, and that's just not good either. So I think the contact cement will allow that bond to have equal pull, because each surface is going to be glued, and then we will get less lifting, less warping, things like that. So again, I have to that's in theory for a lot of things. What I've tested so far, I'm happy with. So please give that a try in the future. And you're not going to be put out that much if you get a small bottle like this, just to experiment. Again, testing. That's what you need to do. So, and fantastic, Matthew, that you learned something else. Hopefully that LOL was related to something that I said that was actually funny, and not something that I did that was embarrassing. What do we got here? It's probably the best use of a dog food dish I've ever seen or heard of for terrain. That's fantastic. I much appreciate that. You should see some of the things that I'm using for this. I mean, you guys know I've used funnels to make some stuff in this, and I don't usually do a ton of found objects. Again, I talked about this, the floating scale of this Kashyyyk build, the massive scale of this is just lending itself to it. Let's not forget that we used stove covers to make our platforms. So that's also a really funny part of this. So at the end of this, I really truthfully should make a laundry list of all the things that I used on this table. So, oh yeah. So anyway, I embarrassed myself enough in front of my wife. So that's just that's meaningless. That won't even register on the radar of embarrassment. So we're good. I did want to bring over the tree just before I sign off on this cast, because I want to show you guys what it is that I have started to do to the top. Let me just clear a bit of space here, and then we'll have a brief chat about that. And I got to give this some time to dry anyway before I can hit. That's actually something I should say. If you are going to use pigments on anything, just be very careful that your surface is 100% dry, because the pigment is, it's like a powder. If you've ever seen your wife put on makeup or your girlfriend put on makeup, you got to make sure you're putting it on a super dry surface. And when you put that on, if you have even a little bit of pooling of ink or paint, it's going to start clumping up there. And then when you go to pull it or streak it out of that area, it's going to be dense, and it's going to leave splotches and streaks, and it's going to be a real mess. So make sure that everything's 100% dry. Put it on with a really light brush, spread it all over, and then when you're really happy with where it is, you can lock it in with either pigment fixer or I said dull coat actually works quite nicely for that. Pigment fixer is nice, but you have to be really controlled with it, and if you've never worked with it before, it can kind of be a bit of a mess because you have to use kind of a capillary or wicking action with it. So typically I'll only do pigment fixer if I have a really rough surface or if I have a little bit more of a room for margin for error. Something like a flat surface, I typically want to use something to spray to lock it in. As opposed to the pigment fixer. You can also put pigment fixer down first if you're going to do a really controlled application, because once you put that in, it will start to set up, but you can't really move it around a lot. So you almost have to really carefully place that. So a little bit of an aside. We'll talk about pigments in another episode. So let's get the tree real quick. Right, so my tree that makes an appearance almost every episode, it seems now. Let's put this guy here. There we go. And let me grab something to show you, and let's just tip this way up. We'll do our best green giant impression. There we go. And I totally understand that that doesn't look the best. I'll try to put the shade down on this to cut a little bit of that off. There we go. And so my apologies if it's super bright. Maybe I'll try to get this light off. Yeah, there we go. That's a bit better, I guess. Let me grab one product. Okay, so what we got going on here, actually I need one more product. Sorry, my bad. All right, so the intent of this is we wanted to start bulking out a little bit on the treetop here. And the reason that we're going to do that, I'm gonna actually see if I can turn this off. Yeah, well, it's really contrasty, but I think that's probably even better for you guys. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to kind of bulk out the top of the tree here, remembering that we're going to be adding some of our foliage, and this will be what we end up kind of building out on these parts of the tree. And so this will be strategically placed, and we'll sort of flesh out some of this. So again, we'll probably use, maybe 10 sprigs or so per branch and just kind of get a little bit of a false canopy going. We decided that we were going to run these off scope, so we don't really need to worry about putting too much foliage on there. Now, this doesn't look like much, I understand. It just looks like just a gnarly mess of embarrassment here. However, what this one's actually going to do is it's going to hold this particular platform right here. Now, it looks a little bit off. It's much more level. I'll assure you, you guys are definitely looking up at a weird angle at this point. But what we're going to do is we're going to incorporate some of the branches right into the piece. So this is going to get a hide covering. It's not going to have much of a bottom. It's going to be fairly flat. But we're going to really incorporate the tree into this. It's really going to be growing around this piece. So how we've done this and what we've used for this is, again, I've shown you this before. This is a paper plate reinforcer for picnics. We've plastic carded the bottom, we've plastic carded the top, and again, the super glue that I used around here didn't work. The hot glue that I used around here didn't work. Contact cement that I used around here, excellent. It is not coming off, it's holding really nicely. So this is going to get a bit of a coat. Now, what we did for this, and I say we, what I did in sharing with you guys, is I created a bit of a wire frame. Now, you've seen people make trees and you've seen people twist pipe cleaners and things like that. This is really just a larger scale example of that. So at the hardware store, I purchased some cable, some wire. I don't even know what it's for. It's got about 6 strands on the inside, and it's bendable enough and flexible enough that I can bend it into shapes, but at the same time, I'm really not struggling to do that, because you don't need something that's so thick that you can't really make nice bends. So what I ended up doing is basically just bending it and then twisting it, and then that gives me a little bit of an armature there. If I want to make it thicker, I just double it up and then twist it. So you can kind of see what I've done here. I've really made kind of a bulbous piece right here, and the celluclay will go over that as well. And then we've sort of extended this branch, a little bit of split here. This one's a little bit thicker, angles up, all good. Now, the surface of this is a little bit waxy. It's got a little bit of a coating, and so I was a little worried about the celluclay not necessarily sticking to this. I was also concerned that it's going to have all these ridges and shapes, that the celluclay is going to be a little bit hard to necessarily not make conform to this. So I don't want the celluclay to have a twist, and I don't want it to have a little bulb on the end. I want the celluclay to be kind of its own layer. So what I did for this, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, but this stuff's called floral tape. It's pretty fantastic stuff. The floral tape is this green stuff here, and what I've done with it is, even though some of the twists are still evident, I've basically created sort of a more uniform base layer here. You know, I was able to flatten this out. I was able to kind of put some twists and turns in there as well. But I have a nice surface area for which the celluclay will probably stick a little bit nicer. As well, when I'm building it out, I'm going to have a little bit more of a flat surface, so I don't have to worry about pressing in, because when I have the celluclay and I'm pushing it on here, if I'm pushing it into all the crevices, naturally it's going to have those on the outside, and then I'm going to have to add more celluclay. It's just going to be a lot more difficult to get it a little bit more uniform. And so, and here, you know, I have these artificial bulbs and things like that. I'll account for that in the celluclay, but it's okay to have bulbous structures on a tree that this big. It's going to just give it a little bit more character. So with the floral tape, the interesting thing about it is that it's not actually sticky in a sense, and it's not actually a tape. I think it's just referred to as a tape just because of the ribbon-like appearance of it. But here's the thing. It easily pulls off and breaks. It's stretchy, and when it stretches out, it kind of keeps that. It doesn't have much elasticity to it. But what happens with it, it's much like, let's say, a wrap that you might see on a pallet or shipping crates and things like that. Because when you put it on, I'll just show you here, for example. When you put it on and then you start stretching the tape over, it's able to kind of just start adhering to itself. It has a little bit of a stick, but it's not an adhesive stick. It's more of almost like a cling, like a static cling almost. And so I wrap it around, I press it in, there we go. And now it's just part of the tree. It's part of the banding that's on here. And I just give it a little bit of a press in, and we're good. And I can wrap that as much as I want, as many concentric circles as I want, to build out the structures. I also use it to sort of create a little bit of an anchor point to the tree. Now, it's not really super strong, but you'll see that this isn't going anywhere. I've actually hot glued the wire to the tree first. So I put it in, I cut a little bit of a hole or drill a bit of a hole, press it in, give it a hot glue. That gives me an anchor point. However, it doesn't hurt to anchor it here, doesn't hurt to anchor it here. Obviously this one here, if I just had one single point coming out, this is going to have a little bit of weight to it. I'm going to add a bit more stuff to it. I wanted more stability. Now it's good, but now it's also flexible. So I can hit that, I can bump that, and the tree's not going to break. I'm not going to snap this off. It's anchored in a flexible format, because here's the truth of it. I'm going to have a platform sticking up here in the tree. Matter of fact, I'm going to put it up there right now to show you. So I got this platform that I need to stick up in here. Let me just walk this down through. Oops. So this is the easier way here. I think you guys you guys can't see that in the overhead because it's so dark. That's fine. You guys will see it from the side here. So let me just pop that in here. There we go. So now we have a platform that's up in the tree. So if I'm interacting up here and I'm bumping this, I want to be able to not have this snap off or break. I also want to have enough flexibility that if I need to manipulate or move something slightly, I can. I'm going to have a platform up here. It's going to sit right there. So I'm going to have lots up here. And if I start interacting with this tree, I want to make sure that I'm not going to have something so fragile that if I happen to bump it, or stiff, if I bump this, the whole branch moves. You see that? There's enough flexibility in this entire branch that it's not going, this flexes. The whole tree doesn't have to move as a result. If this was so stiff and rigid, just moving this a little bit, I'm gonna end up jiggling the whole tree, platforms down here, things are gonna rattle and fall. And to be honest, if a model falls from here to the floor or from here to the tabletop, it's 3 feet, it's broken. I don't need that happening. So everything that's kind of worked into the design is around gameplay. It's around having that almost that courteous manner for players to be able to interact and manipulate. Sure, is it going to be a little bit difficult and awkward to necessarily move a figure on the other side of the table? Sure, but what table isn't? If you're reaching across 3 feet or 4 feet, it's always awkward. However, we're playing a 3 feet horizontal game, we're playing a 3 foot vertical game. So it's going to be super interesting as much as it's going to be inconvenient. But truthfully, trying to work in as much stuff as possible to make it gamer friendly. And a lot of that has to come from the base structure. When I get bark on this and when I get the rest of the finishings on here, no one's ever going to pay any attention to anything that's under the surface. So this is not interesting to anyone but me. But I'm hoping that you guys can kind of see that you can do a lot of cool things with maybe products that you've never used. And in design, there has to be a lot of consideration before you just start slamming things together. With the platforms, are you going to pin them into the tree or just glue it? So it depends. This one up here, if you're referring to the wood one, this one's actually going to be basically just a few glue points. However, the bark itself is actually going to go over part of the platform on where it meets the tree. So like here, I'm actually going to incorporate the celluclate onto this. So it's actually going to be incorporated right into the bark. So that's actually going to be a point of contact there. Here, for example, these sort of arms that are extending up, they're going to be glued right to this platform. The platform itself will probably get a little bit of attack here. And again, that celluclate is going to come up and sort of encroach a little bit on that. So just sort of tie that in. So every one of the platforms, including the bottom platforms that are going to go down here, they'll actually go into the tree. I have the slots cut for them, so they'll be partially incorporated into the tree. Celluclate will get a little bit of an encapsulation around a piece of that, just because those are free floating in a larger spec. So everything's going to be solidified in a couple different ways, tacked for glue, but the strength's probably really going to come from the incorporation into the tree itself. That's a big reason why I have to do a lot of the painting and the construction before I can actually get them solidified to the tree itself. So again, just an explanation around the logic behind the construction of this. So it's almost like a little bit of a feat of engineering. I don't want to overplay my skills of engineering because I have none. But just letting you know that there is some forethought. Okay, let's just tip this back down, close off this stream for this evening. There we go. Fantastic. Turn some more lights back on. Boom. And excellent. There we go. Let there be light. Fantastic. There we go. Hopefully the overhead cam's back on. Fantastic. Yeah, so like I said, the platform is pretty straightforward. So Mr. Egg Sauce, welcome. I have not seen you here before, but welcome. I'm not sure who you are. Perhaps you have a real name. Perhaps we know each other. Perhaps we don't, but welcome nonetheless. So yeah, that's effectively what's going to happen there. These are pretty straightforward. I haven't got much engineering done on these yet, but again, they're going to be hide covering, a little bit of accoutrements on the top. It's going to be kind of done with a plastic card overlay. It's going to have a kind of a black sort of Celtic symbols around the outside. That's kind of what the reference photos seemingly show. Again, I was going to do the banding on here, but I kind of like the paint look. And I just didn't want to overdo the banding. And quite honestly, to do the banding at this really weird, awkward angle and to have it look right is difficult because you can't take a straight piece and follow this curvature because it not only does have to have a curve this way, but it has to have an arc this way. And it just doesn't translate well at all. So I think painting these was the better option. However, with this stuff here, I'm going to be able to do a physical plastic overlay as well as on this piece here because I have the flats right here. I'm just gonna be able to do banding straight around, which I will. So and if I wasn't clear before, this has obvious gaps. I'm going to put some of the hide covering over this first. So I'll probably do one layer that's going to basically be structural, and then I'll end up doing probably an extra thick layer of the squares, and then eventually when that's hardening glue with the glue, these vaults or these cavities will just be negligible. I guess if you poke through them, you can probably get through it, but you'd have to do that with something pretty hard, because it's going to be 3 layers of that sort of thicker that butcher paper. So it ends up being fairly rigid in size and structure. So that is up in the future. So to wrap up the evening, we have a few things here. We're going to do a second coat of this, just FYI. I'm not sure if I was clear about that, but we do 2 coats of that. You guys can see how that sort of dried up, and you can see the hide pattern. And then here you can see that our null oil pieces have dried quite a bit, and we got a little bit of definition, and you can really see that wood grain coming through there, or at least I hope you can see that wood grain coming through there. So that's it. So I'm going to jump back on Facecam just so I can say goodbye in a proper way, and then hopefully you guys will tune in. I believe I had scheduled myself to do another episode on Friday. So I know it's Good Friday, but that's not going to register for me. So it's just going to be a working Friday here in the studio. I don't have to work that day, which is fantastic, which means I'll probably end up doing a little bit of an earlier session if you guys are willing to come join. So let me jump back over to the other cam. All right, so we're going to close off on here so that focuses. Fantastic. So thanks for hanging out tonight, folks. And if you're just joining me now and you see me jumping off, that's really unfortunate. Please make sure you go back and watch this. It'll be on the YouTube channel, so you can find me on the Terrain Studio. Just search that up on YouTube, and you can find this and all the other previous live streams for this. If you want to see the construction of the actual Kashyyyk tree and kind of how that worked, it is on my Patreon. Same thing, Terrain Studio at Patreon.com. You can go find that. You're welcome, Mark. Thanks for joining me this evening. Hopefully I'll see you on Friday. And if you guys want to follow the project and you're just looking for photos and casual updates, I also have the Terrain Studio on Facebook. There's a group there. There's a Legion. I also have a Legion unofficial terrain page. That's a page where lots of people are posting lots of projects. So go check that out if you're looking for inspiration specifically for Legion products. What do I have here? Thanks for the excellent stream tonight. Thank you. Jump on the Patreon right after. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I appreciate any supporters, but obviously the patrons have a special place in my heart because they are helping directly to do all the stuff that we have here on the studio. Do I want to close off with anything here? I don't think so. Yeah, just in relation to checking it out on Friday. I'll be building again. My plan is to really kind of power through in this this Easter weekend. I have I'm actually technically working from home, but I do have the next week off, and so I'm going to be powering through that. And so basically up till Sunday, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'll push out as much free content as I can, and then after Sunday I got a whole week of work, but then I'll be focusing on making some Patreon videos and updates. So in addition to the videos that I do on there, I also do some photo updates as well. So I try to make a little bit more polished video, a little bit less rambling, a little less work, and a little bit just that that cleaner video. So it's not for everyone because some people just like to see the working, but I try to do kind of recap videos a couple times a week on there. So go check that out. But this week, Friday, for sure I'll live stream on Friday. And if I'm feeling up to it, I will probably bring one on Saturday or Sunday. But I also want to power through some work on those days as well. And before I log off and go back to Patreon only, I will make sure that you guys have the most up-to-date analysis of the table and where it's at and how it's looking. I will actually also bring you guys a layout description. So I'll bring the piece of MDF over onto the camera and I'll lay that out in terms of concept. So if you guys are interested in following, you'll know exactly kind of where the project's going as opposed to just these pieces that I'm working on now. So, all right, that is it for me. I need to go get a drink because I've talked way more than I need to.
But I do appreciate you guys hanging out here this evening. So I'll catch you guys all in the next video. And as I said, go back and watch any of the old ones. They're all up there for your convenience to view. So hashtag stay safe, everyone, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Cheers.